episode 163, Ironman 7.3 Atlantic City with Melissa Richardson. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. You will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pursuit of the Perfect Race. Today I'm talking with Melissa Richardson about her recent race at Ironman 7.3 Atlantic City that took place on September 23rd, 2018, where she had a time of 6 hours, 20 minutes, 26 seconds. She's being trained by Dave Jimenez out of Octane Athletics out of North Texas. The temperature on race day was 62 degrees and rose to 68 degrees with a little bit of rain on race day. It was also wetsuit legal this year. Welcome to the show, Melissa. I look forward to hearing about your race.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. So why did you pick this race, being that you live in Texas?
So I raced Galveston in April. Was kind of looking for a back half of the year race to finish out the year. And I started coaching myself in January and had an athlete that wanted to do a, back half of the year race as well. And really it was kind of predicated on, timing for her. So we looked at some options and kind of landed on this one based on timing and ability to get our bikes up there using transport and, thought it would be a fun location for a race given that it's kind of on the water and somewhat flat as well.
Nice.
Of course.
So being that this race happens the same weekend as Augusta, why this race versus Augusta, knowing Augusta has a downriver swim versus this nice saltwater swim?
Good question. The athlete that I'm coaching actually did Augusta last year. That was her first 70.3, so wanted to do something different this year.
Okay. So you didn't want to have the home field advantage of knowing what the course was like. You'd rather go to something new.
Yeah, I don't like to repeat a lot of races, actually, myself. I mean, I have not done Augusta, but she had. We wanted to just do something different for a change.
Okay. So what was your training like going into this race?
Pretty normal. I probably average about 10 hours a week, give or take. Some weeks 8, some weeks 12. I didn't take much time off after Galveston. This is my third 70.3. I did Redman last September, so I've had 3 70.3s in under a year, which is a lot. Took a little bit of time off after Redman last year, a couple of months, but after recovery for a couple of weeks from Galveston, I jumped straight into Atlantic City training.
Wow. So going into this race from Galveston, what was your training like, being that it was mostly outdoors or indoors or whatever? What was this like?
Yeah, so Galveston, I did maybe 2 to 3 rides outside before the race because we had such a, kind of crazy winter. And this race, I had a lot more balance between outside and indoor. I do all of my weekday rides indoor on the trainer, and I do most of my my long rides on the weekends outside. I train with Octane twice a month. We have open water swims and group bike rides, and I actually lead typically the kind of beginner intermediate group bike rides for Octane. So, twice a month I've got that, and then I fill in the other 2 weekends of the month with training with Plano Bike Association or FTC or just some friends out riding or some bike rallies. Picked a few bike rallies this year to do.
Okay. Now, going into this race, what was the most hours you trained in 1 week?
Probably 12 to 13.
Okay. Now, what was your longest swim, bike, and run workouts going into this?
My longest bike ride was a 64 miler. I did the Red River bike rally that goes up to Oklahoma, and that was my longest. And I did a couple of 50 milers as well. And then my longest swim was probably around the 3,000 yard range. I'd done for Galveston, I think, a 4,000 yarder. But I did not swim as much this training cycle. I really only swim probably an average of 1 to 2 times a week. Been focusing a lot more on the bike because that's where I had the biggest opportunity for improvement. based on, how much time you're on the bike in proportion to the swim and the run. And running, I did a 13 miler just on my own, not in a half marathon, but I ran a 13.1 mile train run.
Okay. Now, as volume increases for you, how do you mitigate the risk of being injured?
So one thing that I've really stuck to and adopted with triathlon has been strength training. I strength train twice a week, and it's really just 30 minutes 2 times a week, but it's very focused. I work with a strength trainer that's functional movement based. And really at this point, I mean, she would probably say like, oh, you could strength train on your own. You don't really need me. But she kind of, we work through whatever issues I'm facing. If I've got something that's nagging me, we kind of work through it. And I like her company. So she's a good motivator. So I enjoy spending that time with her. And I've kept that consistent since I started doing triathlon more seriously. I came off of a back injury in 2016, and I pretty much didn't run for well over a year. Anytime I would run, even if it was a couple of miles, I mean, at best, I could run maybe a 13-minute mile, and I would be laid up for almost a week. And I couldn't really figure out what the issue was. I saw a couple different chiropractors, a Rosti, went to a spine doctor. He thought I had SI joint dysfunction. We did a couple different injections, and then I started going to see Corey Sessions at Performance Sports Medicine in Plano, and it turned out that my sacrum was locked over on the right side of my body. So my sacrum was just jammed out of whack, and it was pulling all the ligaments in my glute and SI from the left side and stretching them out. So every time I was running, it was re-aggravating that. So one day he popped it back into place, and I was like, that was it. That's what's been wrong the whole time. After 2 different injections under, general anesthesia and x-ray, we finally figured out what the issue was. And so with Tammy's help, my strength trainer, I really focused on glute strengthening, back strengthening, core strengthening, and my back's been stable since. And I have a few ailments here and there, but I am pretty good about paying attention to recovery. I think it's critically important, and I think it's often ignored. And that's one of the things Dave preaches, as well as recovery. And I do a lot of icing. I do a lot of Normatec. I do a lot of massage, and I'm pretty religious about seeing the chiropractor as well.
Okay. So for your long bike ride and long runs, knowing that that's going to be taxing your body quite a bit, how do you make sure you don't get injured going into those longer sessions?
I always typically have a rest day going into a long weekend, which helps. And when I get done with a long bike, long run, I'm immediately getting protein in. I'm kind of one of these people that has a hard time eating big meals after long training rides. So usually I'll get protein in liquid form. I'll get an Epsom salt bath in. I'll get my stretching in, my foam rolling in. And that's, helped me a lot. And I think too, I haven't been the most durable runner. So moving from standalone running to triathlon, which is kind of where I came into the sport from, was running, has really helped me because I've got that balance across the 3 sports where the biking and the swimming is really non-impact. And running is really the area where I've had the most trouble in the past. Biking really hasn't been an issue, and swimming really hasn't been an issue.
Okay. Now with your training, are you doing a lot of bricks in training?
Yeah, I probably do about a brick a week. And some of them can be up to 5 to 6 miles off the bike. I think 6 miles was probably my longest. 5 to 6 miles is my longest. But usually it's 30 to 40 minutes or so off the bike, and it's usually after my long bike ride.
Okay. So going into all of this training that you've been doing going into Atlantic City, what kind of nutrition did you use while you were working out?
So Galveston I did, and I'm going to go back and give you kind of my lessons learned along the way. This was the first race where I truly felt like I nailed my nutrition. In Galveston, I did all liquid, and honestly, I had to go to the bathroom too many times. Just, taking on so much liquid. I had to stop on the bike and lost about 5 minutes of time just waiting on a porta potty on the bike, and then had to stop a couple different times on the run as well. So I decided for Atlantic City that I was going to do a balance between solid and liquid on the bike. And a few months ago, I moved to making my own nutrition for the bike for solids. And I use a friend of mine actually told me about it. It's a book called Rocket Fuel. And I also have used a few things out of the Scratch Lab Zone portables. But I found that in terms of being able to keep the nutrition, stable, like flying with it, that the Rocket Fuel was the best. So I use their Enduro Balls recipe, which is oatmeal, dates, oatmeal, almonds, flaxseed, hemp seed, pumpkin seed, sunflower seed, a little bit of almond butter, a little bit of honey. So I use those and I make those, and they're about 25 calories a ball. And so I ate 3 of those on the bike. So I have an alarm set on my watch for every 20 minutes. And the rest of my nutrition, I did two gels, and I like the Gatorade Endurance gels because they're almost like liquid. They go down really easily and they're really good on my stomach. I don't have the best digestive system, so I have to be really careful about what I take in. And then I use Infinite, and I have a custom formula with them, and that I also add beta alanine to as part of the custom formula. So I do 1 bottle of Infinite. I did 3 of the Enduro balls, and I did a couple of endurance gels.
Okay, so what's this beta alanine? Did I say it right? What is that?
Yeah, beta alanine. So it's a lactic acid blocker. I do that. I actually have that in pill form as well. So I do a couple of those a few times a day leading up to the race. I don't stay on it all the time. I cycle on and off. So 2 to 3 weeks before the race, I'll start taking the beta alanine regularly. And then I have it in my Infinite formula as well while I'm on the bike. So, essentially I'm trying to keep my legs from being too tired by blocking lactic acid from building up as I'm biking.
Okay. Now, going into this race, you max out your training at 12, 13 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you're not training or racing, you're traveling to races, what are you doing?
Really spending time with my family. I have a 8-year-old son, and then, he's pretty active in theater and ice skating. So, watching him do his thing. And then my family and I, we like to go to movies and go to dinner. We're foodies, cook dinner. We have a swimming pool, so swim here at the house. Just mostly just spend time with my family. And then outside of that, coaching the athletes that I have. And I've been pretty active with trying to get women into the sport, and doing some free programs for this year. We did a free program for women who are first-time triathletes. So that took quite a bit of my time.
Okay. So how big of an issue is balancing life, work, and training for you?
I'm fortunate that I spent 15 years in corporate America, and I've kind of retired from that. So I'm now, kind of stay-at-home mom full-time. So I try to get most of my training done early in the mornings when the boys are asleep, or after they've gone to work and school. Really the biggest sacrifice that I make in terms of family time are those Saturday mornings. And there have been times when I'm in peak training where I don't get home till 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon from Grapevine. So that's tough, but my husband works a really stressful job that's a lot of hours, and so he drives almost about an hour or more each way. And so Saturday mornings are kind of good for him to spend alone time with my son. So it works out. He's super supportive, and that helps a lot. But I try to mitigate, for the most part, time I take away from them. Even on Sunday mornings, I'm up running really early so that when I get back, they're just getting up for the day.
Okay. Now, knowing that you're training 13 hours a week on your big weeks and on average of about 10 to 11 hours a week, do you have any days where you just mentally don't want to train?
Absolutely. And you always have that period of cycle where you're like, why did I sign up for this? What am I doing? And you've got, an ache or pain that's nagging you and you're like, or oftentimes it's when I go to the chiropractor and I don't even know I've got something really hurting and he starts, doing active release therapy. And I'm really like, why did I sign up for this? Because this is super painful. And I try to be consistent. Dave has a really good rule of like, if you do 80% of his workouts, you should be good. I probably do more than 80%. So I've always felt pretty prepared for my races, but, it's definitely a struggle, but I know I feel better when I do the workout, and I know that if I do the workout, I'm going to be prepared. So I usually can mentally struggle through it. I did have some periods of time where, leading up to the race where we had to rest me more days than I intended, just because of some nagging things here and there that were unexpected. But it didn't seem to hurt my overall fitness, which was good.
It seems like you got injured.
Yeah, it was, I had a little bit of shoulder pain and lat issues, a few weeks ago, and I still haven't quite figured out what caused it. Not sure if it was something bike related, something I did in street training or something I did swimming. But my lat got really tight and, I've had to do some cupping and some massages, chiropractor, but one of my last 50-mile rides, I had a 5 to 6 mile run after, and my back locked up on the run, and I actually had to walk all the way into the car on the last mile because I just couldn't physically run. And that hasn't happened to me in forever. So that was in the back of my mind when I went into race day. Was my last really long ride and run, this happened. So is it going to happen today on race day? But, I'm really diligent with, the recovery process of getting my massages, getting the cupping. I mean, I kind of think it takes a village to keep me going sometimes. It's been fine, and it didn't bother me at all race day, and it hasn't bothered me coming off of race day.
Okay. Now to kind of transition a little bit to actually start talking about the race itself, when did you start traveling from North Texas to Atlantic City?
So we left Friday morning.
Wow.
Not a lot of lead time. We flew up to Philadelphia because Dallas to Atlantic City's not real easy to get to as a straight shot. The only airline that flies is Spirit, and I really wasn't interested in flying Spirit, no offense. But so we flew direct to Philly, and from Philly it was about an hour and a 15-minute drive, via rental car. So we actually, we had around a 10 a.m. flight, and we landed, I think, around 2:30 in Philly. And, the athlete check-in closed at 5, in Atlantic City on Friday, but we made it. We made it at 4:40. We kind of assumed, and I kind of assumed that, I was traveling with the athlete that was racing with me. We kind of assumed that we would just check in for athlete check-in on Saturday morning, but we actually made pretty good time on the highway and were able to get our packets on Friday afternoon. So that took a little bit of the pressure off, which was good, because then on Saturday all we really had to worry about was going to an athlete briefing and bike check-in.
So how did you get your bike there?
I hired I love my bike transport. He was going. It was a team race for Triple Threat Tough, so he had probably 15 different racers from Triple Threat going, and so he Omar takes bikes up there. So I dropped my bike off actually on Tuesday, the week of. So, but I have a road bike as well. So I was able to get some spins in here at the house before flying up on Friday. So that was kind of perfect.
Nice. Now, whenever you got there to the check-in process at this race, what was this like in comparison to Galveston and the other race that you've done?
The race director for Atlantic City, Steve Del Monte, he's actually very high energy. And it's a really good vibe. On Friday night, they actually had a happy hour, kind of a meet and greet, and he provided food. There was a Women for Tri meetup as well as part of it. He gave away all kinds of goodies, gave away several race entries for 2019. But I thought that was awesome and something completely different than Galveston. Just getting to meet fellow athletes and the camaraderie that was, kind of taking place. And he clearly cares about what he does and cares about the athletes and cares about their experience. And I thought that was really neat to see.
Wow. What was this mixer like, or happy hour rather?
So they had it right there on the boardwalk, there in New Jersey, and they had, like I said, food and, their sponsors spoke for a few minutes. It was a good way for them to get advertisement for their sponsors. But for the most part, it was low key, and it was just about getting together and, hanging out, and they had drink specials. The drinks weren't covered by them, but there was food that was covered by them. So, we didn't hang out for a long period of time, but it was nice to go and meet some of the ladies as well from the Women for Tri group. So one of the ambassadors that helped, I think, start Women for Tri, she was there. So that was awesome.
Nice. Who is that?
Maura. She was one of the original board members. I think her last name is Haston, Maura Haston. But she's, very active on the Women for Tri Facebook page. And we now have over 50,000 women in that group on Facebook.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So the day before the race, are you trying to get in a certain nutrition plan or monitor a certain meal the day before the race? What is this like for you?
Yeah, like I said, I don't have the best stomach, so I have to be pretty careful about what I eat. So breakfast, the day before, I actually went over to the hotel where my athlete was staying. We were in different hotels, and she had kind of free breakfast coupons. So they had a buffet breakfast. So I stuck to like peanut butter and jelly on toast, and I did have a slice of bacon just because it's bacon and I like bacon, and some fruit. Tried to keep it pretty simple. I don't drink a lot of caffeine really at all. So I stay away from that, so that when I do caffeine in a race, if I need it, I really get a bump from it. And then lunch, we ate like just kind of Subway sandwiches, not a lot of veggies, some baked chips. I drank a lot of water. I'm not a big, I'll drink like Smart Waters, but I don't drink a lot of sports drinks or Noon. I stick a lot to water, and it seems to work well for me. And then for dinner, I just had some halibut with like a pretty plain baked potato, because it's just keeping it simple, doing fish and some good carbs. And throughout the day, I'll snack a little bit, might have a Cliff Bar, or some pretzels or Fig Newtons, things like that.
Okay. So really just kind of topping off all the stores, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
But I'm really good about, I actually have a water bottle where I can turn the knob at the top that tells me how many, water bottles I've drank that day. So, I try to get, 4 or 5 of those down the couple of days before I start. I really hydrated the whole week, but I really paid attention on, Friday, Saturday, starting 2 days leading into the race.
Okay. So y'all got a hotel here. How far away was your hotel from the race venue?
I stayed at the Tropicana, which hindsight may have been a terrible idea because it's, full on casino, but it was only about a mile from the race start. But I did have some issues Friday night with noise, and I think there was like a full-on altercation in my hallway, and security was called, and that was about 3:30 in the morning. So that on Friday night. So after that, I really didn't sleep much the rest of the night, which was, a little bit problematic because that was the night I was planning to bank some sleep.
Right. Now, the day before, you have to go and check your bike in and all that fun stuff. How big of an issue was this, being that you had your bike transported up there versus taking it with you on the plane?
No issue. So Omar texted me and said, I'm going to meet you guys kind of at the transition drop off. So he was able to pull right in to the race, to the transition area and near Ironman Village, and unload his trailer, we had taken pedals off and things like that. So he got the bike ready. And I probably had 100-yard walk to transition to turn in my bike. So it was about as seamless as possible, which was great because I didn't have to worry about anything. And he actually had my gear bag too. So most of my nutrition, even for like breakfast for race morning, was in the bag, along with like my running shoes and my helmet and most of my gear. So that was all together, waiting for me when I got out of the athlete briefing on Saturday morning.
Wow. So on Saturday night, what time are you trying to get in bed?
My goal was, I think I was probably in bed around 8:30. I probably didn't go to bed until closer to 9:30, but I shoot for as early as possible. My husband will tell you I turn into a pumpkin at like 9:00 at night anyway. So, I try to go to bed as early as possible because, I'm not that great a sleeper the night before a race, due to nerves. I'm pretty calm actually. My athlete kept asking me, "Why are you so calm?" But I am pretty calm leading up to the race until about the night before. And then, it's natural. A lot of people don't sleep real well the night before a race. So I knew I wouldn't probably. But I won't take anything the night before because I don't want to wake up groggy, race day. So, I don't know. I didn't have a good sleep weekend. This was probably the only thing that really, didn't go well other than the weather. I bet I slept 10 to 12 hours probably the whole weekend. Even the night after the race, I didn't sleep well.
Wow.
That's not normal for me either. So I know Friday night was an anomaly because of the issues in the hall waking me up. So I probably would have slept a lot better had that not happened.
Right. Now, when did you actually start looking at the weather and paying closer and closer attention to that?
Dave probably won't like this answer, but I'll peek and kind of look at AccuWeather.
Peek?
I'll take a peek at it, briefly. But I know it's the coast, so I didn't put a lot of stock in anything I was seeing, until a couple of days before the race. Every day as the race got closer, the temperature was dropping a little bit. And I'm like, well, that's actually pretty good because Galveston was about 60 degrees, I think, on the run. And although it was super cold on the bike, I thought it was fantastic on the run. And I was like, if it's much warmer, I'm not sure how much better I can improve my time, because that's 60 degrees or so is very optimal running weather for me. And I know that about myself. So, and then, there was a little bit of rain in the forecast, and then it looked like it was passing showers. So, spotty here and there, maybe kind of at race start, and then not again till around noon. And then it turned into, it's going to be raining every hour. So, that was a little disappointing. And this was the first race where I didn't just have myself to worry about. I had an athlete at this time to worry about too. And so, I couldn't stress about it, because if I stressed about it, she would stress about it. And, she had never ridden her bike in the rain, so she was a bit worried about it. But I kind of looked at it as Galveston part 2. I kind of chuckled about it because I'm like, this is literally turning out. I'm like, this is my third 70.3. Two of the 3 have been in rain. So, I don't know what the normal odds of that happening would be, but it's happened. So, it became a reality. The difference between this one and that one, though, was that, at Galveston, as you know, because you raced it too, was by the time we hit the run, it stopped. Whereas this just got worse. So it started out with a light drizzle, and then by the end of the bike, it was a pretty good pouring, not torrential downpour, but it was a good steady rain. And then it just continued the entire run and after the run.
And it was a little cold.
And it was a little bit warmer than Galveston, but with the rain throughout the whole time, it probably made it feel very similar to Galveston. So, but I came off the bike in Galveston with my fingers completely numb to where I couldn't take off my helmet. And I did not have that in Atlantic City, which was great. So I didn't have numbness of limbs, but I did go through a puddle on the bike where literally it was like a wave went into my shoe, my left shoe, and my left tri shoe felt like it weighed about 10 pounds when I got off the bike. So,
wow. So the day of the race, what time are you waking up to get ready for the race, being that you're staying about a mile away?
Hey everybody, I just want to say thank you for listening to the podcast, and I just want to let you know that I've enjoyed having so many people on this show, and I couldn't really do it without your support. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and being a part of what I'm doing. If you would, take a few moments to leave me a review over on iTunes. It would help me out tremendously, and enjoy the show.
So the day of the race, what time are you waking up to get ready for the race, being that you're staying about a mile away?
Yeah, so I got up. Transition actually opened at 4:30, so I think that's the earliest I've been at a race where transition opened at that time. So, and transition closed at 6:30, so you had 2 hours. I don't need 2 hours to stand around and stew. So, I woke up, I think about 3:30, 3:40, and had my breakfast right about 4.
What's for breakfast?
And I actually like it's a recipe out of Shalane's book, Run Fast, Eat Slow, and it's her race day oatmeal. So I get a packet of plain instant like Quaker oatmeal. Typically I do a banana with it. I slice it up and then put the hot water in there, and then raisins and walnuts. And usually I'll do honey and cinnamon, but with the travel, I didn't really want to take a thing of honey. So I did a little bit of almond butter that has honey in it. It's one of those little almond butter packets. So that's about 450 calories or so. So it's pretty perfect. And then I'll have I'll drink a Gatorade and I'll drink a water between eating breakfast and kind of, I'll take a large water with me into transition and I'll drink that. And then I'll do one of those Gatorade endurance carb drinks, the tall packet. I'll do that about 20 minutes before I get in the water. And that's kind of been my ritual. Even for long training days, I kind of do the same thing. So, I kind of keep it very ritualistic. That way I know my stomach's going to react the way I want it to. But yeah, I got to transition probably about 5. We got picked up. I got picked up from the hotel. The athlete I was with, she had made friends with a cab driver, and he kind of took us around the whole weekend. And so he picked her up at 4:30, and then with a few other athletes, we all kind of shared a cab, and then came over to my hotel, picked me up because I was on the way, and then went over to Bader Field, and he dropped us off right before the entrance. So it's perfect. We really didn't have far to walk, and we didn't have to deal with kind of parking. So I guess the first year it was Ironman brand, they had a major parking issue. They didn't charge the $10 parking fee prior to, so people were having to stand in line like in their cars, giving $10 to park, and it was a nightmare. So they charged that with your registration fee, so you didn't have to worry about it. So it was a good flow getting into transition.
Wow. So whenever you get to transition, what are you doing in transition before you actually leave transition to head down to the swim start?
So I feel like I'm a nervous peer, so I have to go to the bathroom like 3 or 4 times. That's probably TMI, but I'm keeping it real. And I'm just focusing on, again, this time I had not just myself, but my athlete to worry about. So I got my stuff ready, and then I went over to her and checked on her, made sure everything was laid out for her the way, you know, she'd been practicing, and make sure it was conducive to her having a quick transition. Looked at tire pressure for both of our tires. You know, I put close to the normal PSI that I normally do, knowing that at that point it was not raining, and it didn't really look like it was like rain was coming. Of course, it was dark, so you couldn't really see cloud cover and things like that. But, you know, there was a chance it wasn't going to rain. It was like 50-50. So, but dropped her PSI down 5 or so from what she normally puts in. And so, yeah, and then spent time, you know, waiting on porta potties.
Wow. Now, knowing that it's wetsuit legal here, are you going to use a full sleeve or sleeveless?
So I prefer sleeveless. I feel like it's less restrictive. I'm slightly claustrophobic, so anything extra for me adds to kind of anxiety. And I have a long sleeve and I have a sleeveless, but the temp was, I think, 72.5, so it was perfect. So yeah, I went with the sleeveless wetsuit, and I try to wait until the last possible minute to get into it again because I have to pee a lot, for one thing.
Wow. Now, you're not peeing in the wetsuit, though.
I did not pee in the wetsuit this time.
This time. Now, with the extra water that you're bringing down to the start, are you making sure that you have extra to pour into your wetsuit?
I did not. I did not pour any extra in my wetsuit. I probably should have, but I didn't.
Okay. Now, before you actually get into your swim wave, or it is actually like a rolling start corral,
it was a rolling start
deal now.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mindset going into this race?
Really focused on execution. Dave had sent me a text like, execute. Like, whatever you're thinking about, think execute. So, you know, we had talked about what I was thinking about in my mental prep that he had me do, you know, the week and a half or so leading up to the race. And a lot of my focus, even though he was like, stop focusing on the things that are nagging you, because I had a little bit of a foot flare up with planters, which I have periodically. I had a calf tear in 2014, and I have some scar tissue in my right calf. And I think it just has a tendency to stay tight, and I have a problem keeping it loose. And when I don't keep it loose, then my foot bothers me for a little bit. So, you know, I had that kind of going on. I had the shoulder thing in the back of my mind. And, so my part of my thinking was, okay, when you swim, you really need to keep that shoulder relaxed. You need to make sure you get a good catch and pull so that you're not torquing it. And on the bike, you really need to keep your shoulders really relaxed, really sink into your arm pads and aero. And so, you know, outside of just knowing the times that I needed to hit for each discipline, it was thinking about those other things that were going to help keep me loose and keep my body in a good, you know, in a good way going from discipline to discipline.
Right. And you have a trial bike, right?
Yes, I have a Cervelo P2.
Okay. When was the last time you got a fit on there?
I had a fit when I bought it at Tri Shop. It was November of this past year. So I did my first 70.3 on a road bike, which I don't recommend, by the way.
So it's been 10 months since you had a fit?
Yes.
Do you think it's time for another fit?
Yes.
Perhaps before a race, maybe?
Yes. Before Waco. It's happening.
Okay. Because, I mean, it just makes sense to get a good fit before a longer bike ride in my mind. Now, knowing that you actually want to execute and have a good day and not really think about the injuries and things that have been bothering you, did you have a goal time of what you wanted to do here?
Yes. I really was trying to hit under 6:30. I had a time of 6:41 at Galveston. And I knew I left time on the table because I had about 12 minutes of bathroom breaks between the bike and the run. So I knew it was doable. But you know, I really knew my biggest area that was kind of the unknown, I guess, was the bike. And that's what I had been trying to work on really improving, versus Galveston. Obviously we had some wind in Galveston. And I don't weigh a lot, so headwinds and crosswinds are not exactly my friend. But I thought I executed my power targets at Galveston exactly how I'd planned. So, I ended up with what I ended up with, based on what we had decided I was going to do, in terms of power. I'm pretty small and my watts per kilogram is not real high. I still have a lot of, I guess I should start with, I didn't really ride bikes when I was a kid. So biking was completely new to me. So I've pretty much started from scratch, with biking, and I've only started biking since probably 2015, and not competitively. And, I spent a lot of time leading kind of a beginner women's ride, not really focusing on power, not really focusing on any sort of speed until the past year or so. So it's not come naturally. I will say that. I have tiny little legs and I have tiny little calves, and tiny quads, but, I'm making progress, but it's been slower than I expected. So the bike was big for me, and having a good bike was critical to make the 6:30 time.
Okay. Now, going into this race, there's no pros here, but it's all age groupers. They send everybody off. How does your swim go for you?
I thought it went pretty well. I actually intended to get in either at the tail end of, they had 5 waves, started with like 26 and under, and my Dave wanted me to get in the 27 to 35, I think, swim group. And by the time I hit transition, due to all my bathroom breaks, it was jam-packed wall-to-wall athletes, and it was very hard to get through. So I ended up in the 36 to 45 minute, and I was actually towards the back of that group, and that's definitely not where I wanted to start. And Dave's, thought was, let's give you more options to draft off of, which I 100% agreed with. And so it wasn't ideal. I ended up kind of working my way probably midway through the 36 to 45 group when I finally got towards the ramp. But it still was a little further back than I intended. When I got in, the water temp was great. I, started off at a pretty decent pace, comfortable, not anything too aggressive. There was a little bit of current and a little bit of chop. It wasn't major waves, but it was consistent. And I definitely, with the salt water, and it was a little bit briny, in terms of, I guess flavor, if you will. I didn't want to swallow really any of that. And so I ended up drifting just a tad bit left of the buoys. You went clockwise around, and this was different than previous years. In the past, they had gone counterclockwise, and I guess there was a buoy they literally called the treadmill buoy, where you were just stuck like a hamster at the buoy, not moving anywhere for like 5 minutes. And so I think their thought was, let's go clockwise and try to mitigate for the treadmill buoy. And I never experienced a stoppage, but I shot way wide left, as I hit the first major turn. And I had to sort of correct. And I think I was sighting okay, but I think it was the current, because I kept having swimmers come diagonally across me. So, and it's like, where are you going? And so, I think a lot of times I had to pull up a little bit, as that was happening. I'm not the best about continuing and just swimming over people. I just saw my thing. And I'm not the best about drafting, which I need to get better at. I kind of tend to swim on my own. But I did course correct at that turn. And then once I made, it's really just kind of an out, make a turn, go straight just maybe 100 meters, and then make another turn, and you're headed all the way back. So it's just kind of a big square or rectangle. I felt like my pace increased and I was moving steady. And then you shoot past where you got in the water towards the end and get out at a different ramp than where you got in. So you have just a little bit longer distance to go on the way back. But I felt like going back, it took me less time. So probably partially because I had to course correct going out, where I drifted left, and I stayed really true to the course going back. And I think my Garmin had me at almost 2,300 yards. So I didn't overshoot too badly, but it could have been a little bit better. I was really hoping for lower 40s. I think I ended up with 44 minutes, but I was really hoping for a little bit lower. But that put me at about on my Garmin, about a 156 per 100. And I had done a 2,000 swim kind of the week and a half before the race at about 154 per 100. So I was kind of right in there. So I was happy. I knew when I came out of the water, I was a couple minutes faster than Galveston. So I had banked a little time, and I was happy about that.
Okay. Now, whenever you start thinking of the clarity of the water here, how far could you see in the water?
You really couldn't see anything.
Really? So it was really murky?
Yeah. And I don't think the weather wasn't helping because, it was there was, rain and stuff, and that didn't help at all.
Wow. So had it started raining on the swim?
It was dry at the start, but I think it had rained the night before. I can't even remember. That's terrible, but I can't remember. But it definitely was murky, and I don't know if that's normal for there. But I had looked at some race reports, and it didn't look like there was great visibility regardless. And it was really salty. I actually came out of the water with like dirt all over my face. I looked like I had a beard. Yes. And they had like a shower, but I didn't know I had like dirt all over my face. I mean, I'd rinsed off a little bit, but the girl next to me came out of the water at the same time. And she's like, you might want to wipe your face. So thanks to her, I had my towel and I wiped my face. But, and luckily I had put my running shoes in like a grocery bag upside down with my socks in those upside down to keep it, in case it rained, that would be dry. And that was probably the smartest decision that I made the whole day.
Wow. Now, whenever you start getting to transition, how did T1 go for you? You were in there long enough to take a nap and pack a lunch.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
I think
no,
I did not go well. Change?
So you have to understand the setup at Atlantic City. The bike doesn't start until you get out of transition completely, and you have to ride. I don't know what the distance is specifically, but you have to ride a good ways on Bader Field before you exit. So what I can tell you is in T2, it was over 4 minutes before I got to my rack, and that was because of biking in. So from the time I got off of the course, the bike course, onto Bader Field, hit the dismount line, and because it was so slick, walking my bike to the rack, because I was, in my tri-cleats, and it was super slick, it was over 4 minutes. So when you take that out of it, my transition wasn't that bad, but I definitely left time on the table for my T1. I had like a windbreaker, and it has zip-on sleeves, and where you can zip them off, and I put it on. And then I decided that I wanted to take the sleeves off, and I started unzipping the sleeves, and I couldn't get them all the way unzipped. So I had to take the jacket off, unzip the sleeves completely, and then put my vest back on. So that ate up way more time than I intended. And I decided that because I was so cold at Galveston, I would wear at least my fingerless gloves. And so I had to put those on, which I don't normally wear in a 70.3, but I took the time to put those on. So it was a couple extra things for sure. I'm not the best at transition. I'm not going to lie. I need to practice more.
Wow. So you get out on the bike course. How are the first 2 miles for you?
Really good. My legs felt good. It was, it looked like rain was coming in, but it hadn't really started yet. I probably had between 5 to 10 miles of no rain. And then, I hit, my watch gives me, splits every 5 minutes. I actually ride with time. I have a Garmin Phoenix 5. I ride with time, normalized power, and heart rate. So I don't ride with speed. average speed as a metric on, I do have it on if I flip to another watch face, to the second, set of metrics, but I don't have it on the one visible to me. But I kind of knew like, hey, I need around 17 minutes every five miles. So, I think I got my first split and I was like 15 something. And I was like, whoa, I'm way ahead. And, I had you'll probably laugh at this, but I had a normalized power target of like 106 and I was probably about 130 at that point. And I'm like, yeah, I'm way ahead of what I need to be. But I felt really good. It hadn't started raining yet. And then the rain started and, but there's a lot of straightaways and it's a lot of highway. You spend a lot of time. There's some back roads and then there's the expressway, and they block off the entire right lane of the expressway. So it's coned off. So you've got cars to your left, but you've got cones. And then for any of the exits, they put a big truck there. So you have to be kind of careful as you go to the right of the truck because there's some rumble strips there on the edge of the highway. So you kind of got to navigate that a couple of times during the course. And it's 2.5 loops. So you hit the aid station 3 times during the bike course. But I backed off a little bit probably after the first 10 miles just to bring my normalized power down a little bit. But I still stayed consistently in the 120s on power, which was above what Dave and I had talked about. So sorry, Dave, but I knew kind of what my pace was based on those 5-mile splits. And I knew that if I dropped my normalized power down to the target, there was no way I was going to maintain that pace. And I was feeling really good and I was hitting my nutrition and my stomach felt great. And the rain was getting heavier and honestly, I didn't want to be out there any longer than I had to be. And I thought I might sacrifice my run a little bit, but I'm okay with it because I felt like I was so far ahead on my bike target that, I was probably still going to I might be a little slower on my run, but I didn't think it was going to be enough to offset the gain that I had on my bike, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Now, what was your FTP and what percentage is 106 of your FTP that you wanted to hit here at Atlantic City?
So my FTP is 133. And
that's probably
it's about 80%.
Okay.
So I ended up with a normalized power of 123. So I was, quite above the 106 target.
So what data screens are you looking at on your watch that you're looking at?
So total time on the bike, normalized power, and heart rate.
Okay. So you're not going off of an average 3-second power or anything like that?
No, normalized power.
Just normalized. Strictly normalized.
Yes.
Why?
That's always what Dave and I talked about.
Okay. Were you looking at a certain cadence that you wanted to hit as well?
I had cadence on my second data screen. So I had distance, average speed, and cadence. But I kind of know by feel what my cadence is. And something that I did in this race that I hadn't done before was I was, when I was hitting probably higher power targets, I was obviously pushing a slightly higher gear. And I kind of feel good between 80 and 85 RPM, which is probably lower than a lot of people ride. But I've talked to other women, and it seems to be consistent with women, that feels right to them. But there were time periods where I would drop down, especially in the back half, so the last 20 miles or so, where for a few minutes I would drop down to a lower gear and increase my cadence just to get some leg relief. And I would cycle kind of back and forth between, a harder gear and a lesser gear, every, 15, 20 minutes or so. And that seemed to work really well for me in this race because it is flat. So, you're not getting a lot of time where you're not pedaling. You're pedaling for, my time was 3 hours and 6 minutes and change. So I'm pedaling for 3 hours and 6 minutes and change. So you're not getting a lot of relief on your own without, I feel like changing my gears was giving me a little bit of leg relief.
Right, because on a flat course, there's really no hills to take advantage of on the downside.
Right.
You have to pedal the whole time.
Yep. I don't really consider myself a great climber. But every overpass we hit or on ramp, I guess is more accurate. I was passing people, and a lot of times I was still in aero passing people. There were people that were, standing up off their bikes. I'm like, this is not a hill. So, I felt really good about that I was able to maintain pace, when there was a little bit of change in elevation.
Okay. Now, how are the aid stations on this course?
There is only one aid station, but you hit it 3 times. So they had a lot of teenagers working it. I personally, Redman, I did utilize the aid station, but in Galveston and this race, I was self-sufficient. So I had 2 bottles of Infinite on me in case I needed a second bottle, just as I'm a little bit of an over planner. So you never know, something might happen. You might be out there longer than you intended. So I wanted to have extra. And I had my Aero bottle with water, and then I had another 20 ounce with just water. And like I said earlier, I like just water. I tend to do well with it. So I made sure when I did Redman, I did not have enough water. And so I used the aid station for water, and I kind of learned my lesson that I need to make sure I have water, because sometimes I just crave water. So I think I did a good balance. I drank two water bottles and of the 4, and all of my Infinite in the 1. So I used three bottles total.
Wow.
Of 20 to 24 ounces each.
Okay. Now, being that you're a little bit further back, did you see a lot of flats on the bike course?
Yeah, there were a lot of crashes.
Really?
So,
crashes?
Yeah, a lot more than I anticipated. So, similar to Galveston, there's a lot of people that were passing way too closely, not calling out left. Multiple times I had 2 guys pass me simultaneously, so we were 3 wide in the lane. It is a full lane, it's a full car lane, but still that's pushing it a little bit because the second rider is really close to you when they're passing. There were, I guess when they had the truck blocking the lane, you had maybe a foot or 2 of clearance to the right before you had to cross the rumble strips and go around that, go into basically the shoulder and then get back on the highway. So apparently there was a lot of accidents right there. I mean, there were bottles. Well, I've never seen this many water bottles on a course. It was like landmines everywhere. Lots of water bottles, but people were passing too close, going around the rumble strips, coming back in from passing and clipping. A lot of people said they got clipped, or they got clipped on a hairpin. There was a couple of hairpin turns on the course because it was a 2.5 loop course. You had to face that a few times. And just in general, the roads were slick. So the turns were slick. I know a girl slid out on a turn. There was a girl that slid out actually into the highway traffic. And fortunately, the driver in that lane saw her and stopped before hitting her, but her bike and everything was on the highway with oncoming traffic, or the flow of traffic. So I saw 2 or 3 different ambulances. There was I can't remember if it was a female or a male, but on the side of the road with a bloody face. I mean, just blood down their face. So it was probably crazier than it had to be, and the weather didn't help that. But there were several flats too, along the course. I don't think I saw any more than Galveston. I think it was pretty similar in terms of flats, but definitely more crashes for sure.
Wow. Now, as far as the quality of the road here, you mentioned a few rumble strips, but the quality of the road, how was that?
It was pretty good. They actually had it was marked the best I've ever seen a race marked. I mean, every crack, anything had orange on it. So and with the rain, that was good. Once it really started raining, you started having the roads were covered and you really couldn't see. And so I had to be really cautious of going through puddles because you didn't know if that was a hole underneath it or not. So that was the only part that was sketchy, but there's nothing that the race coordinators could have done about that. But I thought it was extremely well marked both in navigation and road hazard. And for the most part, the roads were pretty smooth. I mean, the highway was great. I mean, it was no issues whatsoever. There was a couple of areas where you kind of on back roads, and that's where the aid station was. And there were a few spots here and there, but I would say for the most part, better than the roads we have around here, for sure.
Now, miles 40, 45, and 50, you're getting through some of the later portions of the bike ride. You've been on the bike for about 2 hours, 45 minutes, and it's been raining. You've already got your shoe filled with water. It's kind of cold out there with the wind. How are you doing mentally?
I'm doing good, but I am definitely, my legs are feeling it. That's probably about the point where I started cycling off and on of, higher and lower gears, to give my legs some relief. But I knew I was on a good pace. And, I kind of felt like with Galveston, I was like, I've been here before. Like you did the whole entire bike in Galveston through rain. So in a way, maybe that gave me an advantage because I felt confident riding in the rain. I wasn't really worried too bad. I'm not, because I didn't ride bikes really as a kid, I'm not the best cornerer. So I definitely took turns a lot slower, the hairpin turns, and there's a couple turns when you go back into Atlantic City, you hit Atlantic City twice. So I definitely took those a lot slower than I would have normally. And my philosophy was it's better to go slow and stay upright than go fast and be on my side. So that was the mentality that I took, and I took everything in stride. And I'm a big believer in you take what the day gives you, and you've got to, I'm an over planner. We're triathletes. We're probably 95% of us are more type A personalities, right? You like to control things, but I'm pretty good at adapting and rolling with it, better probably in this sport than I am most of the time in life. But I kind of just said, you know what, you execute, you're executing now. Don't let up, because I knew that I was having the bike of my life. Like, I don't normally ride 18 miles per hour. So usually my bike rides are in the 16s. I had rolled about 17 at the Red River Rally, which was my longest ride, of 64 miles. And that was a hilly course. So I felt really good about 17 on that ride. And so, but I had some help. There were times where I was drafting. So, on that ride. So I knew I was having the bike of my life, and I didn't want to let go of that. I wanted to stay with it. So for the most part, I feel like I was really consistent. I kind of call myself Steady Eddie. Like, I'm not fantastic at any of the 3 disciplines. I'm just like Steady Eddie.
Exactly. Now, towards the later portion of the bike ride, miles 53, 54, 55, going into transition, are you doing anything to start preparing to start running?
Yeah, I'm, periodically anyways, I'm getting some seat relief, but I kind of dropped it down in gear, got a little higher cadence, stood up, stretched my calves multiple times, kind of drop your calf down, get a good, nice stretch on the back of your leg. So I did that multiple times kind of in the last couple of miles. And I kept saying to myself, dang, where is transition? Because it felt like when we exited, you literally, they tell you it's exit 2. So I see 1 mile to exit 2. I know I'm about to exit, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. And then it's like, I don't have distance on my watch. Remember, I just have time on my primary face. And so I'm like, where is transition? Like, I feel like I went like an extra 2 or 3 miles before I hit transition. But I spend the time really focusing on giving my legs the relief and getting good stretches and getting off the seat and stuff so that I can go straight into the run.
Okay, so are you wanting to go into transition with a certain mindset of, hey, I'm going to go in here, make sure I get things slow, orderly, and make sure I don't waste any movement, or are you getting there and going as fast as you can in and out?
No, I think I'm more of like slow and focused. I actually had a pretty decent T2 outside of. I mean, so again, you ride for a while before you hit the dismount line, and they were shouting at us like, it's really slick. They already knew it was super slick, and the rain was super steady at this point. And so my rack was actually pretty far from bike in and out and closer to run out. So I had to walk with my bike a lot further than a lot of people did.
Really?
Yeah. That's just where I'm in the 35 to 39 women's age group. So that's just, we were more on the back half of all of the racks. So, given that I don't do a flying dismount. It's just not my thing. So I'm, in my tri shoes with my cleats, and that's super slick. I just knew there was no way I could run with my bike. It was that slick. So I had to take it pretty slow. I did pop over into the grass a little bit, but people had already been doing that. So it was like muddy, and I'm like, I don't want to just have mud caked all over my cleats, coming into transition. And so I got back on the paved kind of area and walked the rest of the way into my rack. And when I got to my rack, I moved pretty quickly. But it was well over 4 minutes before I made it to my rack from the time I hit my watch, knowing that I was off of the 56-mile course.
Wow. Now, you get to T2, you get to the area, you rack your bike. You're putting on basically wet shoes and wet socks at this point.
So they were dry because I had put them in a shopping bag and turned them upside down.
Well, for a minute.
For a minute. I wear socks on the bike. So I sleep in socks. I'm bizarre. So I wear socks like all the time. So I had socks on for the bike. I took those off, threw those in my bag. And when I get into transition, I whatever discipline, like swim or whatever, I throw my stuff in my bag so I don't have stuff everywhere. So I just, it's not organized. It's not like I sit there and like, oh, let me unzip this. But I do put stuff in my bag. I just throw it in there. And that way, when I get into like T2, I don't have like a bunch of bike stuff and swim stuff all over the place. So it's very focused when I get in there because only the stuff for the run is left. But my hat was wet. My towel was wet. That kind of stuff was wet. But I had brand new socks that I'd placed that were dry, and my shoes were dry. So I get all that on, and I feel pretty good. I run out of transition, and you run about a mile and a quarter almost on Bader Field before you go on to out into Atlantic City, and then you make your way to the boardwalk. And most of the run is on the boardwalk, but you have, a couple miles before you get to the boardwalk. Okay. And yeah, so that was kind of my plan.
So from a pace perspective, what were you wanting to do from a pace perspective for the first few miles?
So my target, sometimes Dave gives me heart rate, sometimes he gives me pace. So this race was more about pace for the run, and the goal was 11 minutes for the first mile, and then 2 through 9 about 10:20 per mile, and then if I felt good at mile 10 to start turning it on. So I tried to follow that. I felt really good coming out of transition, had a much faster first mile than I intended to, but it wasn't on purpose. It's just I was running by feel, and I wasn't trying to push it. I actually stopped myself and sort of slowed myself down a little bit, but I had a much faster first mile than I intended to. But and then even though we kind of said 10:20 for 2 through 9, I had told Dave that my total goal for the race was right about a 10-minute mile pace. Like I wanted to end the race averaging about 10 miles per hour.
So you want about a 2 hour, 10 minute or 2 hour, 15 minute run?
Yeah, about as close to a 2:10 as I could. Yes.
Okay. So knowing that it's raining and your shoes and socks are probably soaked by the time you get to mile 3, how are you going to approach the remaining 10 miles of in the rain?
You know, it was just, the bad part was we didn't really have crowd support. My guess is they probably would have had 3 to 4 times the number of people spectating on the boardwalk if it had been dry. So at that point, it was sheer will. I mean, I consider myself fairly mentally tough. I have a pretty decent pain tolerance, and I don't know, sometimes I just call it sheer stubbornness. I just don't like to quit. And I knew that in my mind, I kept saying, look, you are on track for a PR. Don't let it go. Don't let this run. Don't let this rain dictate anything else than what your plan is to execute, and just execute it. Just forget about, and it's hard to say forget about the rain and forget about your feet being wet. I had sprayed my feet with Triglide before, knowing that the possibility of rain was coming, to keep blisters away. And knock on wood, I have been very fortunate. I never get blisters on my feet. Thank God. So, that was a saving grace, because I think if I'd gotten a blister, it would have been hard to overcome that, but I didn't. So, yeah, I managed to do, pretty well with, mentally through the rain. I mean, at that point, I'd already been in the rain so long, it was like, it is what it is.
Right. Now, there's a few parts of the run course where you're actually on sand, right?
There is. They put mats down. So you have to go downstairs, and then you're on these mats. And it's not for very long, but honestly, I may have preferred to run just on the sand, because the mats were a little bubbled in places, and I was like, I had to slow down considerably because I was just worried I was going to trip.
Really?
And they were kind of slick because they had been rained on. So hindsight, I mean, because when the rain comes in with the sand, it kind of packs the sand. So it wasn't like it was loose sand. It had packed a little bit. And I did see a guy's picture. He actually posted, like, to Steve, the race director, you can put the mats down, but it doesn't mean we have to run on them. And he ran on the sand. I'm like, oh, you know what? I should have done that. I should have just run on the sand. So, I think it might have been better, because I was really like tipped, I was kind of like high stepping on the mats.
Wow. So whenever you actually start thinking of a nutrition plan for the run, how is this different than the bike ride?
I go all gels for the run. I don't do solids. And I stick to the Gatorade endurance gels. They seem to do pretty well on my stomach. I don't have digestive issues with them. So, my goal was about 150 calories an hour. I probably ended up with about maybe close to that. Probably what I can calculate is 120, but I don't carry water with me or Gatorade. And I take in Gatorade endurance probably every other aid station. And they had an aid station about every mile and a quarter. So I'm definitely getting calories with the Gatorade endurance, but I don't know how many calories I'm getting. So I did 3 gels. I probably could have done 4, but I felt really good. And my stomach was in a spot where I was like, it feels okay, but I don't want to push the boundary of it. I had some digestive issues on the run at Galveston, and I didn't want to go there again because it cost me a lot of time. For one, I had to stop at porta potties, and 2, I had to slow down because I just couldn't, my stomach was such, I couldn't physically run any faster. So, I didn't want to have that happen. So I kind of teetered the line between bare minimum and, and what my body could take. So, and then at mile 10, I added Coke, again, cause I don't do caffeine. So when I do, I actually get a good bump from it. I didn't feel like I just needed the Coke, but I thought, you know what, it's there. I'm going to go ahead and start it. Cause mentally from about mile 9 through the end, really 9 through 11, was probably my toughest of the miles, on the run, and really of the whole race. that was the part that I struggled the most.
What made it so rough?
I started having a little bit of knee pain, like just, where your quad and IT kind of meet your knee just from probably pushing the bike as much as I did. And I hadn't had any knee pain in any runs. So it was a little unexpected, but I've had it happen before in races. It actually happened to me in Redman. And sometimes when that happens, my knee will buckle on me as I run. So I have to go to more of a run walk. And my strategy was run from aid station to aid station. So walk the aid station, which allows me to drink without getting stuff all over my face and myself. And then it also gives my body kind of a little bit of recovery to reset form, and then to refocus. And that's how I race. I break things up and I say, okay, you really just have to make it from this aid station to this aid station. And then, when I get through that aid station, I'm like, okay, then you run to the next aid station. And that helps me mentally break up the race so that I'm not thinking about, I have 13.1 miles to run, and it feels massive. And, after you've just come off 56 miles on the bike. So, I look forward to that little bit of break, both mentally and physically. But when I hit about mile 10, it let up some, and I thought, okay, just hang on, knee, just hang on. Cause I knew I was right where I needed to be, time wise. I was actually sub 10-minute mile total average, leading up to that point, just barely, but it was like 10, I think around a 9:57 minute mile. And, but mile 9 was by far my slowest mile. I'm actually kind of looking at my splits, and mile 9 was 11:32. So I slowed way down. And up until that point I had been mostly 9s. And so, high 9s. And then it felt like the turnaround took forever. So you go down to one end of the boardwalk, you turn around, and you run all the way down to the other end of the boardwalk past the Ferris wheel. And I saw the mile 10 marker, and I thought, okay, it feels like it's like 3 miles back to the finish, because I'd passed the finish on the way, out. And so you see that, and that gives you a little bit of a mental shake too, because you're like, oh, it's right there, but like I still have so many more miles to go. And I think at that point you have like 5 miles to go. And so I'm like, I hit mile 10 marker, and I'm like, where is the turnaround? And mentally I was just like, I just need the turnaround. I need the turnaround. And you just keep going, and you don't turn around until probably you're well past 10 and a half miles, I think, at that point. So it's like another half mile down before you hit the turnaround. And then once I hit the turnaround, I knew I could make it in. I was able to flip the switch again and be like, okay, just keep the pace. And my last 2 miles were mile 11 was 10:24 and mile 12 was 10:05. So, and mile 13 was 9:51. So I definitely turned it back on.
Wow.
For me.
So now going into the actual run here, what data screens did you want to have on your watch to monitor while you're on the run?
So I have time, heart rate, and average pace. And then on my secondary screen I have distance, and current pace, and maybe cadence. I don't even remember what the third one is, but it doesn't matter.
Okay. So on the run course here at Atlantic City, what was the funniest thing that you saw?
Well, supposedly, I didn't see her, but supposedly there's a lady that sings the whole time, and it's not great singing, but somehow I managed to miss her. I don't know how. But yeah, she kind of yodels almost. And
what does that sound like?
You're not going to get me to do that. Could try though. But yeah, the athlete I was with, she saw her, but I didn't see her. There was a guy handing out soggy pretzels. It was raining, so that was pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there wasn't a ton of spectators. There was some volunteers that were dressed up, tutus, and they had the little inflatable, like clapper, hands, and they were doing that. So I gave my bracelet out to one of the girls that had like beads on and was like using one of the clappers, and she had a tutu on and stuff, because I thought, it's miserable out here, and these guys, nobody had a bad attitude about being out there. They were doing their best to support us and encourage us, and that was really awesome. So it was, you looked forward to the aid stations because that was kind of the only people you saw throughout the race.
Wow. So miles 11 and 12, you're kind of battling the knee pain, but you're kind of getting towards the end of the race. How are you doing through these miles?
Once I hit 11, which was right after the turnaround, I hit a much better mental space. And I did really good talking to people. Like, I would say stuff to people as I would pass them and talk to them. I ran with several different people. I never ran for long periods of time with anyone. But it was funny because there's been a lot of postings on the Atlantic City Facebook group, since the race. And, there was a girl that had posted that she didn't think the press coverage was very representative of the demographics in the race.
What do you mean?
It was a lot of white men in the race photos and not a lot of women or people of color or different demographics. And, I said, I felt like there was a lot of ladies out there that looked strong. And, I posted, like, she wanted the ladies to post like pictures. So I gave her like a finisher pic, and, a guy posted, and he was like, I was the tall guy that you were running with like the last 2 miles. And he was like, thanks for the support out there. So, I would try to keep it really light with people. I would say, like, I would pass people on the bike and I would be like, it's just a little drizzle, like just a little, like, I would tell them good job, on the run and the bike. So I always tried to keep it really light. And that helps your mood, because how can you be you can be in pain, but like, how can you focus on the pain if you're like smiling and trying to make other people feel good and encouraging them? So I really take that to heart. And, some people didn't really, they didn't like, especially on the bike, I think people were so miserable. Like, they kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but I was like one guy I passed and I was like, smile, this is supposed to be fun. And, I think he probably gave me like a, go to H look, but yeah, I think you've got to do that stuff, right? Because, we're out there for fun. Let's be realistic. I'm a middle pack racer. I'm not going to world championships, at least not now. I hope to get faster. I would like to shoot for a sub 6 hour, and I think it's doable. I think I'm within reach, of doing it. But, I want to keep it fun. I want to keep it real. Right.
Now, the last 800 meters of the run course into the finish chute, how was this for you?
It was great. I kind of didn't feel any pain at that point, and my foot had actually held up fairly well. I could feel it. I've got the little bit of planters going on, and I could feel it. But I think with the colder temp, it kind of kept it a little more numb. So I've maybe worked in my favor. My knee really wasn't hurting me at that point, and I was able to speed up a little bit and run it on in strong. And I felt strong when I finished. I don't know that I could have done a ton more. I really felt like I left it all out there on Sunday, but yeah, I felt strong, and I felt like I finished strong.
Nice. So after you finished, what did you get to do next?
So I had, I looked at my watch and, stopped my Garmin, of course. And I saw 6:20, and I was, my mind was blown because, you're seeing your watch on the different disciplines, but I hadn't done, I really didn't pay that much attention to what my transition time was. I hadn't really done the math. And so I knew I'd beat 6:30, but I had no idea I had beat my goal time by like just about 10 minutes. And I'm not much of a crier, but I was completely overwhelmed. And I I just sort of broke down. Like they had our morning clothes bags, which I had my phone in and my hotel key, because the finish and transition were at completely different locations. So, you finished on the boardwalk, and I was about 0.4 miles from my hotel at finish. So I was like, well, I'll be able to just walk to my hotel. And that was why it was perfect to Uber, because Omar was getting my stuff for the transport out of transition. So I didn't have to go back to transition, which was a blessing, because you just didn't have to deal with it. And so I went into the building that was adjacent to the finish to get my morning clothes bag. And there wasn't like bathrooms or anything. So I just like sort of changed behind a freight truck that was like away from everybody. The young girl that was kind of, checking out morning bags, she was like, yeah, people are just kind of going and hiding and changing places. So that's what I did, and got out of my wet stuff. And then, yeah, I called my husband first thing, because they didn't travel with me. And, and my husband was like, what is wrong? You did awesome. And I was like, I know. I was like, I left it. I gave everything I had. I literally emptied the tank. There's nothing else I could have done. Other than maybe some transition time, I left everything on the table during the 3 legs. I emptied the tank, so to speak. So, I felt, I felt awesome. I felt like so grateful to have been able to do my training, execute on the day of, and despite the weather conditions, like have a great race and do everything I plan to do. And that feeling, there's nothing like that feeling, to have, as much as it can, like I said, given the weather, everything go right. Every leg of the race went right for me at Atlantic City.
Wow. Now, what's something that you learned about this race experience that you'd like to pass on to someone who hasn't done this race before?
I think the weather has been different every year. So just with any race, be prepared to go with the flow in terms of weather. Because it can be really hot on the run there. You're totally exposed on the boardwalk. So, and being on the coast, the weather can change within 24 hours leading up to the race. So I don't like to overpack gear, but you need to really be prepared in terms of what the weather can bring out there. I think it was good that I was there were a lot of flats out on the course. I think it was good that I had kind of the thicker tires. Was rolling the 25s, and they're pretty good with chip seal and everything else. And so I think they were really durable for the race. And then the other piece was that for me, I can't stress the importance of nailing the nutrition. I mean, it's one of those things that I tell my athletes, like, practice, but this was really the best example for me of, I really truly practiced my nutrition every single long training ride, and I hit my nutrition exactly as I needed to, and it showed in my results. And I think you don't have as good of a day when you don't hit the nutrition. I did not hit the nutrition at Redman. That race took a big toll on me. I had to actually stop taking in nutrition on the bike, and I got behind, and it killed me on the run. And then I got sick on the run in Galveston due to a gel I took that wasn't the Gatorade Endurance gel, and I didn't make that mistake again. So, but the race director is fantastic, and he will do anything to make sure that the athletes have a great experience. And so, go to the athlete briefings, listen to his Facebook Live. He gives you great information about the course. I think that's also really, really good to do for this course. But if you like Galveston, you'll like this course, because it's very, I'm calling it Galveston Part 2. I mean, it's very similar because you're on the coast, but it's unpredictable weather, and that is what you get.
Okay. Now, looking back on it, how well prepared for this race do you think you were?
I definitely took more time off in the month leading up to the race than I intended. There were a couple of weeks where Dave rested me, 3 days, 2 weeks in a row. I missed one of my long bike rides. I've had some saddle issues. And so I had a saddle sore I had to deal with, and I could not ride for a couple of days due to it. And so I did miss a long ride, but I was, consistency is key. I was super consistent. I had, really stuck to my long runs as well. And I've had some of the most mileage I've ever run in this past training block. So I felt really good about my run. I had a long road back from having the back issues, and it's taken me a long time to regain some speed. But I will tell you that I run my half marathon PR is a 2:04, and it's a high 2:04, so almost 2:05. And I was 2:11 in Atlantic City. So I was only between 6 and 7 minutes off of my standalone PR. So I did everything right. That, to me, that's super close. And when you can run, a half marathon off 56 miles on the bike that closely to your half marathon time, that's your standalone half marathon time, you've really executed your race well. And I felt like that, and I feel faster than I've been. I kind of want to do a half marathon, which I haven't done since Cowtown, where I paced another athlete, just to see if I am a lot faster. But I've got to get my foot better. I don't want to tax my foot right now. And I've got Waco coming up in 4 weeks and some change, which may have not been the wisest decision in my life to sign up for 2 half Ironman 5 weeks apart. But I've been trying not to think about it too much, just resting and getting my body ready to have a couple more hard training weeks and then go back into taper.
Okay. Well, we covered quite a bit about your race. Do you have anything else you want to add?
My big things are like, really, you can put in the training, and being consistent is crucial, but don't underestimate recovery. Don't underestimate nutrition. Those are critical to have a good race. You want to go stir crazy, I know, in your taper, but if you've got a coach, listen to your coach or follow your plan and adhere to your taper. Get your hydration on point, get your nutrition on point. I cannot overemphasize the importance I think strength training has been in, keeping me pretty healthy. I've had some issues here and there, but this is nothing and compared to the issues I had prior to doing strength training. And when I have had a minor issue, I recover much faster from it these days than I used to. So, I might be out for a couple months, whereas most of the time I can train through, an ache and pain here and there now, whereas before I couldn't do that. So I think the strength training's been huge. And I can't thank Tammy enough. I have a great team. I can't say enough for them. I see a nutritionist periodically, Maria Paula at Life Cycle Nutrition. I see Corey Sessions at Performance Sports Medicine, Dave Jimenez, my coach, Tammy is my strength trainer. And I actually worked a couple times with Beth Hibbard, who's a retired pro triathlete on my swim. She's a Division I swimmer. Great, fantastic swimmer. And we made a couple of tweaks to my technique on swim, and that's made a huge difference even in the last couple of months. So, and then getting massages, Johnny, my friend, he does my massages and he does cupping, and cupping seems to work really well for me. So, that keeps me loose. So I like having the massage and the cupping together. It's a bonus because a lot of massage therapists only do massage, but having the cupping is an extra bonus. So
nice. So to kind of transition a little bit more to wrap everything up, What races are on your bucket list?
I would love to do Victoria 70.3. I absolutely love kind of Vancouver area. I love Victoria. I've been there a couple of times. My husband's in-laws live half the year up in Seattle and half the year down here. So doing that race is feasible because I can fly up to Seattle and then drive across and ferry over to Victoria. So that's definitely on my list to do. And I'd like to do it in the next couple of years.
Why not next year?
I don't know. I'm taking a little bit of a break. I've done this. Waco will be 4 70.3s in 13 months for me. And I'm tired. My body's tired. And I want to, I need to focus on the family. My family sacrificed a lot for me to do this. So I kind of want to wake up on a Saturday and if I want to run 3 miles, I can not have anyone tell me how many miles I'm running today or how many miles I'm biking today. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll still do all 3, but I just don't want to do anything serious for a few months after Waco. And then, so really I'm open right now for 2019. I don't have anything I'm actually registered for, which is kind of nice. And I've kind of been back and forth mentally on, do I go ahead and make the jump and do a full next year? But I'm sort of leaning against that. I feel like I'm making good ground with, speed. And I kind of want to focus on, I don't know if I want to have a 16-hour full Ironman. I'd like to work on improving my bike some more so that when I do a full, I can do it in a reason. I'd love to do, a 13 to 15-hour full Ironman versus a 17-hour full Ironman. So I think that makes a difference. And so if I can spend the next year, maybe work more on my bike, get it in a good space, then maybe I'll feel better about doing a full. And I'm not crazy about the time commitment right now or the toll that, it takes on my body. So I haven't been the most durable runner. So that's a concern. So yeah, I might drop down to do more Olympics and sprints next year. I did one sprint this year, all year. And I kind of miss that. I kind of miss doing some sprints and Olympics. So I may drop down in distance. Maybe I'll do a 70.3 back half of the year next year, but yeah, it definitely won't be before summer. So I've got a couple of athletes doing Galveston, but I'm not planning on doing Galveston myself. So yeah, I'm kind of wide open.
Okay. Well, the next question is just to wrap everything up. What's your definition of a perfect race?
I think it's really taking what the day gives you and, I hate to say make lemonade out of lemons, but I think that is what it is. You can't control a lot of variables, but control what you can control. Don't worry about what you can't. Take what the day gives you and execute to the best of your ability. And when this was really the first long distance race where I ended and I said, okay, I executed everything exactly how I planned, maybe even a little above what I planned in terms of my power target for my bike. And I had nothing left in the tank. I emptied the tank and I am 100% satisfied that I did everything that I could within my control to have the race that I had planned. And I think that's, it's a great feeling when that happens, for sure. It's, like I said, I was overwhelmed with emotion because I knew for me, I had, raced the perfect race.
Wow. Well, Melissa, I just want to take a minute and say thank you so much for coming on. I've enjoyed hearing about your race, and I look forward to following you in the future.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. Have a good day, okay?
You too.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.